Well, let's get started. Today we'll be discussing the NCUA's first letter of 2019 and how to prepare yourself for that. I guess first, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Kevin Ivey. I'm a security solutions engineer here at TraceSecurity. I've been working in the information technology field for 15 years now, and I have a degree in information systems. At TraceSecurity, I currently perform all of our cybersecurity services, including audits, risk assessments, social engineering engagements, vulnerability assessments, and various penetration testing. Additionally, I assist with the development and refinement of our services to ensure that our clients are getting the best value and the best service that meets their goals. On the screen, as you can see, I've included my LinkedIn profile, and I'll leave it up there for a few seconds for any of those folks that would like to connect with me on that platform. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about TraceSecurity. We were founded in 2004 and initially primarily focused on credit unions and providing cybersecurity services for them. Since that time, we have developed into other industries, including healthcare and education, and as of today, we have delivered over 10,000 service reports to our clients and have worked with over 2,000 credit unions around the country. Our typical clients range in assets anywhere from 5 million to over 10 billion. So we cover the entire spectrum, and our services are scaled to do just that. We like to say that we are CUNA Strategic Services exclusive alliance provider for IT security compliance, risk, and audit solutions for credit unions. We are headquartered, as I mentioned earlier, in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and we have currently approximately 85 employees. And some of those analysts and employees are scattered throughout the country. So before we get started, let's take a look at what we will be discussing today. To start us off, we'll be discussing the NCUA's supervisory priorities as stated in the first letter of 2019 and what they mean for credit unions. We'll go over those items, which will include the Automated Cybersecurity Examination Toolbox, or ASAT as we like to call it. We will speak about risk assessments, risk management programs, and last, we will speak about service provider oversight. All right, so let's jump into the NCUA supervisory priorities for 2019. So as we know, the NCUA sent out their first letter detailing their priorities for 2019. Of that information, it is stated that examiners will continue conducting information security and maturity assessments using the ASAT that we mentioned earlier, which also stands for Automated Cybersecurity Examination Toolbox. This isn't anything different than what the examiners have been doing in recent years, so we'll jump into the two additional areas that you guys are going to need to focus on this year, which is IT risk management and service provider oversight. So let's start from the top and discuss the ASAT. The ASAT is based on FFIEC Cybersecurity Assessment Tool, or the CAT tool that I like to call it. The FFIEC CAT is a free tool that's offered for credit unions to determine their cybersecurity maturity. Once this was released, TraceSecurity decided to develop an easy-to-use, intuitive web interface that allows you to perform this assessment instead of going through all the hoops of reading through documentation and plugging this and that in. We call this the Cybersecurity Assessment Tool, or CSAT. You know, we like to break everything down. We offer 3 services for our cybersecurity assessment tool. We offer the CSAT Free, the CSAT Plus, and the CSAT Premium. So we'll give a quick overview of those different offerings so you can distinguish the difference between those two. First, our CSAT tool is completely free for everyone, and it's a great way to determine your cybersecurity posture based on the FFIEC guidance. We have developed an easy-to-use, step-by-step web interface to assist with this assessment. This assessment provides an overview of your organization's risk levels. And I did want to mention, I'd like to stop to let you know that these do not replace risk assessments, that you still need to perform risk assessments because of the level of detail that a risk assessment provides is much more than a CSAT or CAT or whatever you want to call it. With that said, if you're interested in having a Trace Information Security Analyst, or ISA as we call it, to assist you through the assessments, we offer 2 paid services to do that. The first one is the CSAT Plus service. And for this service, you're assigned a Trace Information Security Analyst to provide guidance and consultation during the assessment. This ISA will perform an analysis of your inherent risk profile and the cybersecurity maturity responses that you provide. The ISA will also conduct a gap analysis between your inherent risk levels and actual levels, as well as conduct a gap analysis between your target overall cybersecurity maturity level and the actual levels. With this service, you'll be provided with a detailed report that includes an overall summary, as well as recommendations for improvements for areas that we deem necessary. The next one is the CSAT Premium. If you would like to have an analyst or an ISA perform the entire assessments for you, then that's what this service says. The service includes all the items that we previously mentioned from the CSAT Plus service, but it's a more hands-on approach. So you will get an analyst that's going to go through with you, provide assistance in any of the controls, help you define what means what, as well as assist you in putting data into the assessment. And similar to the CSAT Plus, you do get a report, a detailed report that includes an overall summary and recommendations where applicable. So next, I'll show you, we talked about it a good bit, so let's show you a couple of screenshots of that particular platform. So if any of you would like to go take a look at this, all you have to do is navigate to CSAT, which is CSAT, TraceSecurity.com. You can go in there, you can register for free, put your email address in, put your information in. You will be presented with this particular portal right here. Next screenshot. This is just another screenshot of that of the particular assessment. This is part of the inherent risk profile analysis, where you go through. There's multiple check boxes. You determine where you fit in as opposed to the question, and then it spits out information for you. Okay, so let's discuss risk assessments and what they are. But before we jump into risk assessments, let's first talk about what a risk is. Basically, a risk is any threat to your business data, critical systems, and/or business processes. And no businesses are excluded, and they're all going to face some sort of risk as we continue to exist. So let's understand first that not all risk is bad. You know, as companies innovate and improve and adapt, because times and technology, of course, change, with that comes different risk. And at a certain point, you introduce that into your environment, and you have to perform analysis of them. Oftentimes, to achieve the goals that we set for ourselves, we have to take a risk. So let's move forward to risk assessment, now that we understand what a risk assessment is. I mean, what a risk is, I'm sorry. So what is a risk assessment? Well, it's a whole bunch of things, and it can be really technical, it can be really detailed, but to start, risk assessments allow you to assess the risk and the potential threats to your business. And to start doing that, we must begin by establishing what is called controls. These are basically things to check for to determine if a threat affects your business. For example, some of the controls that you would check to determine if there's elevated risk for fire damage in a specific area is, does this area have smoke detectors? Is automated fire suppression equipment present? And as you can see with those two examples, that answering those controls in a specific way will drive a risk level for the particular threat that mentioned. Also, keep in mind that your control framework should constantly be evolving and increasing as technology advances and threats increase. While establishing controls, you will also determine inherent risk levels for your organization. Inherent risk is typically defined as a level of risk in place in order to achieve an entity's objectives and before actions are taken to alter the risk, impact, or likelihood. Whereas residual risk is the remaining level of risk following the development of implementation of the entity's response. Basically, once you've established controls and the inherent risk levels, you go through those controls, enter your responses, and this will provide you with the residual risk levels that your organization has. Performing risk assessments are one of the crucial steps in developing a cybersecurity roadmap because it identifies areas of concern that require implementation for decreasing your risk footprint. TraceSecurity makes risk assessments and these processes easy. We take the guidance from the National Institutes of Standards and Technology, or NIST as they call it, as well as common threats and organizations, as well as common risk and threats that organizations may face to determine the overall risk of your business. We like to use our TraceCSO platform to perform all of our assessments and analyze the risks that you face. For our risk assessments, we assign experienced information security analysts to perform our assessments to ensure that you are getting accurate pictures of the risks that your organization faces. Our risk assessment process is a 5-step process. The first step is identifying assets such as computers, servers, and even people. The next step is going to be gathering information about IT risk and controls, which can include interviewing key personnel, collecting policy documents, and reviewing policies. Step 3 is categorizing risk, which is where we identify, estimate, and prioritize the risk in your IT environment. Once we have an understanding of the IT environment, we then compare risk and the controls that are already in place to mitigate them. That will allow us to provide a comprehensive report that details the residual risk levels that your organization faces, as well as a roadmap on how to achieve a reasonable amount of your business risk that you have defined. Okay, so let's have a little fun before we continue. I have a trivia question for you all. And to answer the trivia question, you're going to have to use the Zoom chat box. So the winner of this gets a $10 Starbucks gift card. Yes, I think that's correct. A $10 Starbucks gift card. So be ready to be really quick. Okay. What came first, the chicken or the egg?
We have a winner.
Who's the winner? The chat window moved really, really fast, so we're going to have to scroll to determine who the actual winner was. So give us just a second.
Lindsay R. Lindsay R.
Lindsay R. You won the $10 Starbucks gift card for answering that really difficult trivia question. So once we take this webinar offline, we'll reach out to you, and of course, make sure that you do get that gift card, because you know, us Americans really enjoy our caffeine. Okay, cool. So we wanted to hop away from the information a little bit, just have a little bit of fun and kind of take the edge off. Before we dig into risk management, I wanted to take a break from the information and kind of show you some Starlink statistics. And this is a website that I typically like to grab information from just to see stuff like that. And here it is on the screen. The total amount of data records lost or stolen since 2013 is an astonishing 13 billion records. Since we're throwing statistics out there, let's continue. The next one is every day 6 million records are lost or stolen. That goes down to every hour 252,000 records are lost or stolen. Every minute 4,000 records are lost and stolen. And last, 70 records are lost and stolen every second. So every time you see that second change, just kind of think about it logically. 70 records have just been stolen. So next, let's look at the data records stolen or lost by each industry type for 2018. Top of the list is social media at 76%, followed by other, retail, technology, industrial, government, education, healthcare, and the bottom of the list is hospitality. You may have noticed the absence of the financial services, and I was kind of shocked by that as well, because I've kind of followed this trend for years now, and this is the first year that financial services did not make this list. So I would assume that means that everyone is doing fantastic, and we're securing our data and our financial records. So we'll hop to the next slide, which kind of drives that point home. In 2017, we can see that financial made the list, and that it was in the top 5 spot at 7.92% of all data records stolen by industry. I've included these statistics and slides in the presentation because maintaining a successful risk management program can directly affect your business or organization's ability to protect its data. And that leads us to the wonderful world of risk management. This is one of the new topics that have been included in NCUA's first letter of 2019. We will discuss a little bit about what the NCUA said, as well as how to effectively manage risk. So, to start, all regulations, regardless of industry, require some type of plan to manage risk. In the past, we know that the NCUA examiners have been satisfied, for the most part, with credit unions just having risk assessments performed. Just getting a risk assessment performed, examiners, they were happy with that. Well, that's not the case anymore. Their first letter, as stated in the letter, that they will be examining the effectiveness of credit unions to manage risk. This means that examiners will be assessing your IT risk management program as a whole to determine if you are effectively identifying, remediating, and controlling the inherent risk to appropriate residual risk levels. So let's talk about risk management. It is a continuous process for evaluating and responding to threats. To understand the process better, we'll walk through a typical risk management process. But first, let's kind of discuss risk appetite and risk tolerance. Okay, so risk appetite and tolerance, you may be asking, okay, what is that? Appetite, that's usually something I like to pinpoint down with supper, dinner, lunch, snacks, whatever the case may be. Well, not this case. So risk appetite is the amount of risk an organization is willing to accept in pursuit of its business objectives. Whereas risk tolerance is the tolerable deviation from the level set by the risk appetite and business objectives. Determining your organization's risk appetite is a key process in identifying risks that you may accept and you may not accept. So let's look at the risk management process. Okay, we can see that here we have, it's a 5-step process. But first, the 3 essentials of risk management are, as in the picture, don't do anything wrong today, do not do anything wrong tomorrow, and just repeat. You know, it's that simple. That's all you have to do. Outside of the humor, it is a detailed process and something that you have to consistently work at. So we'll go through the 5 areas that I deem pretty critical for a successful risk management process. First one is to identify your risk. The first step to an effective IT risk management program is evaluating the unique vulnerabilities and threats of the organization, as well as the theoretical effectiveness of the organization's existing security measures. Threats can include anything from natural disasters and incompetent employees to lax web browsing policies and limited to physical or virtual security. So once you have identified the risk, you move on to measuring the risk. Once the organization's specific threats are identified, you have to determine the likelihood of their occurrence and then multiply that by their influence on the organization's operations. During step 3 of IT risk management, we like to evaluate the risk to determine which risk pose the biggest threat to our operations. And then we make those particular ones top priority. That leads directly into the next step, which is mitigating risk. During this step, you assess your highest ranked risk and you set out a plan to treat or modify these risks to achieve acceptable risk levels that you have established in what we mentioned in the last slide with risk appetite and tolerance. And of course, the last step is monitoring risk. The last step of an effective IT risk management program is to track and monitor the risk through comprehensive data to avoid future risks that require impulsive actions. Now, here are some tips on running a successful and effective risk management program. First, you must take a holistic approach to determining and managing the risk that your organization faces. This could include developing common control libraries and identifying the threats that your business faces. Next, managing risk is a living program. As the threats that you are faced with increase and continue to evolve as expected, so should your program. This means that you should continuously make improvements to your program to account for those changes, such as accounting for new controls and accounting for new threats that your business faces. With all that said, the best advice that I can give you for running an effective risk management program is to be persistent and realizing that this isn't just a one-time assessment or some some project that's going to lead to a secure and efficient environment for operating business, that it's going to be an ongoing thing. And I did want to mention that we do have a TraceCSO platform risk management module. It's one interface, one portal, and within that module, you have the ability to perform risk assessments, view your risk levels, and perform management tasks such as accepting risk or remediating them. The TraceSecurity risk management module allows for collaboration and even assigning different specific items to the appropriate personnel. If any of you guys would like more information on this or a demo of that particular product, feel free to reach out to us via email. We'd be glad to put that on our calendars and hop into that platform and show you that. With all the risk assessment and management information out of the way, let's briefly discuss service provider oversight, something that affects a lot of us. We tend, you know, in the past to get to a point where we like to pass the buck, as we say. You know, we get our online banking through this service provider, or we get our internet through this service provider, so we don't really have to do X, Y, Z best practice security controls. Well, that's not the case any longer. The NCUA said that they're going to be focusing on, in particular, service provider oversight. So let's briefly go over service provider oversight, because I know I've taken a bunch of your time already today. To have a successful service provider oversight program, we must first put together a team of individuals that's going to assist in the development and maintenance of this program. Once a team has been established, you must take an inventory to identify all your vendors, all the service providers that you have a business relationship with that help support you and your business functions. And this should include any business that interacts with yours, not just you know, the main ones. A part of taking the inventory should include gathering information about those individual vendors, such as who's the primary contact, what type of agreements do we have in place, and things of that nature. Next, you should take a look at your current vendor due diligence procedures to determine if they're adequate or not. If they're not, make sure to include processes that help with identifying the risk posed by those relationships. If you do not have any vendor due diligence procedures, now is probably a better time than ever to start developing one. There's a lot of information out there and a lot of various resources to assist you in doing that. So what are some building blocks of creating vendor due diligence procedures? You might be asking, since we just brought that up. So here's a few. Starting with gathering information about the vendor. This information will assist you with performing vendor risk assessments to determine what type of risk is created by having a relationship with them. This vendor risk assessment process should and will evolve over time as you learn different things to look for. Once you've determined the risk that will be created by the relationship, you should establish roles and responsibilities for the vendors through contractual agreements if you don't already have them. The next step is to continuously monitor the third party for important reports such as audit reports, control testing reports, anything of that nature. These type of reports are going to help you determine if something has drastically changed, either negatively or positively, for those service providers. And the last thing is to review processes regularly. Don't get stuck in a rut where you, hey, I've established this fantastic program, we think it's great, and it's always going to be good forever. That's not the case. We do know that things change, technology changes, and so do vendor agreements, and so should they. So it's going to be a consistent thing, just like we spoke about with the risk management processes. Once you get a baseline established, you're going to continuously reassess those. You're going to identify areas that need improvement. You're going to do those. Some things may need to be pulled out, wherever the case may be. It is a continuous process. And it's a crucial part of service provider oversight, is consistently evaluating processes to determine the needs. All right, so that leads us into our next trivia time. So for this one, the first person that can tell us in the Zoom chat window wins another Starbucks gift card. So from today's webinar, can anyone tell me what the two new areas for supervisory focus are, as stated in the first letter of 2019 by the NCUA? BSA Cybersecurity, you got it right.
That is from Annette Art.
Annette Art, fantastic. You won yourself a Starbucks gift card. I know it's $10. I know inflation is really crazy in this country, so you can probably only get like half of a cup of coffee at this point. Put the thoughts there. Definitely. Okay. So that kind of wraps up this webinar. I know it was a lot of information to take on, but just to kind of give an overview, we went over the first letter and what they detailed in it and how it translates into services that Trace offer, such as the ASAT. We do know that examiners are going to continue to use that to measure you. We know that the two additional areas for focus are going to be IT risk management and then service provider oversight. Now, before we do wrap it up, you know, in years past, examiners would come in and they would accept risk assessments. You know, you've performed a risk assessment or you've had a vendor perform a risk assessment for you. Fantastic. That's great. They checked that off on the list and they moved on to the next item. I did want you to be aware that, you know, going forward, when these examiners do come in, they're going to look at that risk assessment. It's going to show them that you've identified all the risk and all the threats that you have in your organization, but they're going to want to see how you've gone further, how you've taken all of that information and turned that into a program. So if you got a report that said, hey, you have all these high risk items, these medium risk items, what have you done outside of assessing them to complete the program? Have you mitigated them? Have you avoided them? Have you accepted them? Whatever the case may be, those are some of the key things that they're going to be looking for when they perform their exams.
Hey, we have one thing to add. This is Natalie from Trace. I'm on this webinar with Kevin. We see a couple of people raising their hands. Instead of raising your hand, please ask your questions through the chat window, or you can email us after the webinar and we will answer this question.
Yeah, so we'll compile a list of the questions that we find in the chat window, and then we'll go through them. Whichever ones we don't get to go through, we will reach out to you and let you know. Or if you want to reach out to us, we'd be more than happy to facilitate a phone call or email communication, anything of that nature, just so we make sure that we get you guys' questions answered. And then while they're doing that, I was going to kind of keep talking about the exam. So the service provider oversight, we do know that in years past that they kind of overlooked those particular areas because we were able to, as I mentioned earlier, pass the buck over to those service providers because, you know, that service provider hosts my online banking, so I don't have to worry about risk assessments for that, or I don't have to worry about encryption or anything like that. They're going to hone in on those areas now, and they're going to want to know that you are holding accountable your third-party vendors or service providers to the security controls. So if they're requiring encryption, for example, instead of being like, oh yeah, you know, the online banking host, they may have encryption. No, they're going to want to know that as a part of your processes and your service provider oversight, that you're checking for those things, and you're requiring that vendor. You're like, hey, you know, this is 2019. Data leaks, data breaches happen pretty frequently. I want to know that you're using strong encryption. Show me that, and things of that nature. That's what the whole letter was about. We were able to, you know, kind of skate by for some time by passing the buck, but that's not the case any longer. They want to know that you're active in the process with your vendors and securing data and financial information. And I think, are we still getting questions together, or?
Last call for questions. Any questions? We'll stay on the line for another 30 seconds.
If you guys don't have any questions, feel free to give me a call. I can continue talking, and I'd be more than happy to talk through any of the questions. And like I mentioned earlier in the webinar, if any of you want any demos of our TraceSecurity risk management module, or if you would like more information about our CSAT services, anything of that nature, feel free to reach out to us. We'd be glad to present you with that information, as well as a demo of any of the services or platforms that we do offer to make sure that they meet your business needs. And it looks like we may have a question or may not. Okay, so we don't have any questions. Like I said, reach out to us. Let us know the two winners from the trivia, the easy trivia question, and then the overview of this webinar trivia question. We're going to reach out to each of you, and then we will make sure that you get that Starbucks gift card so you can get caffeinated and get to work.